Muammar Gaddafi wasn't trying to unite any Africa. Muammar Gaddafi was a power monger who all that he wanted was to be the king of Africa.
All right, Andre, thank you very much for coming to the show.
You're very welcome.
This is YWS, Young, Wild and Smart, and we really appreciate having you on this show, sharing your experiences on the things that happened before we were even on this earth. You know, for us, it's something that we see as an opportunity, having elders like you who are willing to share their knowledge in enlightening the young people of this generation into finding ways that can make us and help us understand the world that we are living right now. I believe that you would agree that most of the things that you have seen happening back then, till today, they're still playing a huge role on the life that we are living today. So I would like to welcome you, and of course, I would like you to introduce yourself to the audiences. Who is AHMED MOTIA?
Okay, my name is AHMED MOTIA, as you've probably gathered. I'm a teacher by profession, and I've been doing some literacy consulting work at places like Soweto and Atchitwa and places like that. My main goal right now is to empower the community members so that they can become more able in whatever they're doing.
Thank you, sir. So let's try to get to know more about the book. What I would like to know is what was the inspiration or perhaps the motivation for you to write this book? For me, when I read this book for the first time, I came to understand a lot of different things in relation to what is happening right now. From the very first pages of this book, it talks about this book being aimed at the unsung women of South Africa.
Very much so.
What was the motivation behind that?
Well, the primary reason for writing the book, first of all, was the 1976 Soweto uprising, which resulted in the deaths of many children and, of course, the injury of many children as well. And but I dedicated it to the women of South Africa because quite often it is the women of South Africa that do not really get the credit that they deserve. Although behind the scenes they have done so much work, but often it is their husbands or their male counterparts which get most of the credit. And I wanted to bring home the story of one specific woman who led the liberation movement of South Africa. And I wanted to highlight her role so that people come to realize the kind of sacrifices that the women of South Africa have made to the struggle, which unfortunately, like I said, their role has been largely marginalized. And I wanted to bring it to the fore.
All right. So speaking of the unsung women, right? To someone out there might think that since whenever we talk about the uprisings and stuff, it's always the men's names that always come up. Mm-hmm. The likes of the world respected person, Steve Biko, Nelson Mandela. Why was it so much of men being the most spoken names? What were the women's role during the uprising? I'm not only looking at it from the point of being the mothers of the society and stuff like that, but on the political structures. which women were there and what were the main activities that the women were partaking on?
For example, we all have heard about Mandela, but there's very little written about Winnie Mandela and her contribution to the struggle. You know, whenever there was some form of difficulty that the black people went through, she was the first person to get into her VW and be there. It wasn't the men that were there, it was the women. She was there. And she had her group of women that were very, very much involved in the struggle. But like I said, unfortunately, it is the men that get the credit. It's the men that are in the forefront. But the women in the background have done more for the struggle than even, I would say, the men that have done.
Not so long ago, it was Women's Month, and we saw from all sides of the country that there was sort of an acknowledgement for the women of South Africa. Recently, it was Heritage Month, and nowadays it has just become a thing of when it's those kind of days, that's when we show love and stuff like that. And for a young person in South Africa, right, a person who has read so much about the work that was done by men, what would be your words to them for them to be inspired into looking more into the deeds that were done by the mothers of society?
Okay, let's just first look at we just had a Heritage Day a few days ago. And often the white community always looked at themselves as the superior group. And they wanted the black community to consider themselves as inferior. Now, that is really not appropriate, because I think we are all equal. We are all God's creation, and we are all the same. Our blood is the same. Our skins may be different, but we are all the same. We are all human beings. And I think we fail to recognize our humanity. And because we fail to recognize our humanity, we commit all kinds of atrocities against those that we do not consider as equal to us. And that was all about apartheid. Now, during the apartheid period, people like Winnie Mandela, yes, but also the wife of Steve Biko, the Maseka, I forget her full name, they played a very important role, and yet we have not given credit to these women. We recognize the role the men have played. We recognize and we highlight the role the men have played in the liberation struggle, but we have not recognized, at least not to the same extent, as I think Tutu has said very clearly, that his wife has played a very important role in his life. Yet we have written, so much has been written about Tutu, but not much about his wife, Ria. And unfortunately, although Tutu himself recognized the role that his wife has played, we, the citizens of this country, have not really recognized the kind of role the women have played, because they're always in the background. And because they're in the background, we do not acknowledge their role, unfortunately.
So this kind of make me go back to high school reading The Animal Farm, where one of the pigs made a very powerful statement saying that in a farm, all animals are equal, but other animals are more equal than others.
Right.
from what you're saying, it also gives me a feeling that as much as we can say we are all human and we are all equal, in terms of men and women, men have been put in a position whereby they kind of feel or seem as if they are more important than women. That's the kind of feeling that I get from that. Looking at back then during apartheid, whereby white women started striking for certain roles in society, I come to notice that when it comes to gender, it doesn't really sort of make a, how can I say, gender becomes a thing of what happens between men and women in the terms of others feeling superior than others. It's almost the same thing also when you talk about race. Women feels like men make themselves more superior than them, and us as the indigenous people, we feel the same way when it comes to the white race, and it gives me mixed emotions. You see.
Okay. Let's just take over the example of our own mothers. Our mothers play a very important role in our lives,
Yes.
but they are not often given the credit for the role that they play. If you look at women that become pregnant and have children, where do they leave their children? They leave it with the grandmother.
Yes.
It's not with the father, it's not with the grandfather, it's with the grandmother. It's the grandmothers and the mothers of this world that have really shaped your life, for example. It is your mother that has shaped your life. It is the mother that has shaped all of our lives. Yet we will talk about our fathers, we will rarely talk about the contribution made by our mothers. And yet it is the mothers of this world who are making the greater contribution, are working longer hours. Look, even in the workplace, it is the women that comes home from work, still has to prepare supper, and still do the washing, etc., etc. It's not the men. Yet we do not give women the credit they deserve. We have a tendency to highlight the role the men play, but not the role that women have played. And we continue to do that even up to today. We do not recognize the role the mothers have played in our own lives as well.
True.
And yet they are playing such an important role. In some cases they are the breadwinners, and yet we don't recognize it as the breadwinner. Fathers often have mistresses and they have, go on to other things. Not the mothers so much. The mothers are very faithful to their husbands. The mothers are good people to bring up the children. But as children too, we prefer to give credit to our fathers, but not so much to our mothers. And I think we are at fault here because we don't appreciate the role the women have played in our lives, in our own lives. Forget about the lives of other people. Forget the liberation struggle. Forget for a moment all the things that we see around us. It is the women that play an important role in our own life, in our own upbringing, and have made us who we are. Not the fathers. The father's contribution is very minimal. He may consider himself the breadwinner, but really it is the mother who makes the real great sacrifices. And we don't give credit to her, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, no, I do understand that, and I for one, I would say maybe that lack of recognition comes from us just being humans, not being able to see where there's love and seeing more where there's fear. I believe that, and I will go back to the whole apartheid thing. So from a child who was raised by both parents remembers more the fear that he had for his father than his mother's love.
True.
That's one thing that I've come to realize in this life. And connecting that with the apartheid system and stuff, today we have a lot of black young people who say that they would wish to have apartheid again because the law there was much stronger. Despite the pains that people had back then, they wish that they could have apartheid back again because they believe that if that system come back, it might be able to restore the problems that we're having today.
Yeah, we look at the superficial levels, and at the superficial level, we would think that apartheid was good. But we forget the kind of atrocities that apartheid created for the masses, for the black people as a whole. If you look at the trauma that people went through, if you look at the pain that the people went through, you would not want apartheid to be back again. Yes, it's true. There might be less crime in this country because the authorities were more stringent and more firm about criminals and so forth. But as a whole, I think the freedom that people enjoy today is far greater and more important. And you can only compare this with, for example, the Palestinians. They are fighting for freedom. Forget about independence, they're fighting for freedom. Essentially, they're fighting for freedom. We have that freedom today, but we don't appreciate it. It's like everything else. What you have, you very rarely appreciate. It's what you don't have. It's the beautiful car, the Mercedes, and so forth, that you don't have. That's what you long for. That's what you want. Not the things that you have. The bicycle that you may have is far greater and more important to that person who owns the bicycle than the person who owns the Mercedes. The person who owns the Mercedes doesn't even appreciate this Mercedes. But we long to have that Mercedes because, it has a status symbol. And, as human beings, we are more concerned about status and prestige and all those things that are not important in life, far more than what the things are important in life. The food that you get when you go home at night is important, but you don't appreciate it, and you don't even think about it that I am grateful for the food I have on the table. You think about the glory of the other person, the great things the other person may have. You may have porridge 5 days a week, and the other person has meat and all kinds of other food. You want that, but you don't appreciate how hard it was for the person who brought that porridge to you, how hard it was for that person. That you don't look at it. You only look at, I've got porridge, but he's got meat and other stuff.
True.
We always look at the other person and what the other people have far more than what we already have. Love is something that we all have and we can all give, but we don't appreciate it. We would rather have somebody standing on us and forcing us to do things far more, and we will respect that person, but you won't respect the kind, gentle human being that is helping you. That's the way we are, unfortunately. And I think we have to change that mindset, because if you change that mindset, we will have a better life and we will have a better humanity than what we have at the present moment. But it requires a mindset, a change of mindset.
So speaking of the mindset, for one, I believe that for a person to be able to recognize something and appreciate something, there should be at least a level of understanding, a level of knowledge, right? And perhaps a sense of them inside relating to whatever that is happening, right? You say, we spoke about freedom, right? Do you believe that the Mandela Long Walk to Freedom, it was a success? Looking at the history that you know and what is happening in the present day.
Well, Mandela has become an icon, so much so that we respect him, yes, which we do. And he has made a lot of sacrifices. Yes, I grant you that. But there were certain things as far as the Freedom Charter is concerned, for example, in which he met the bankers and the industrialists in London. And they asked him about what will you do about land redistribution? What will you do about the nationalization of the banks and so forth and so on? And Mandela said, don't worry, we'll take care of everything. Nothing of that sort will happen. In a way, if you look today, political apartheid is over, but economic apartheid is very much intact. You look around you in this country, and every step that you take, it's economic apartheid that is running the country. It's economic apartheid that is controlling you and me. All of us are controlled by our economic situation. We don't recognize how the banks are involved in creating poverty. We look at poverty and we blame it on the person who is poor.
True.
We forget that there are factors around him that are causing his poverty. And the banks primarily are responsible for creating poverty, and yet we've never examined the situation of the banks. I'll give you a national example. The IMF, for example. The IMF imposes certain, and that's the reason why we're having the present situation in French territories.
Oh yeah.
The Niger and all those.
Yeah.
Because colonialism is still very much intact. And for example, the IMF, let me come back to the IMF. It used to get a loan from the IMF, you have to meet certain conditions. All those conditions are such that, for example, if they give you a loan, that loan is subject to conditions like you can only buy stuff from America, because the IMF is an American institution.
Yeah.
And so is the World Bank. And you have to buy it in dollars, because the dollar is the reserve currency of the world.
Yes.
They will ask you to end the subsidies which the poor need for food, for example. They want you to end the subsidies so that you can pay them more money for the loan that they've given you. They're not concerned about the poverty and the hardship that poor people will go through because the food subsidies are taken away. They don't care about that. They're concerned about their loan and how that loan will be paid. So they will tell you, end the food subsidies so that you have more money in the till, so that you can pay us our loan. That is their primary concern. And if you examine the real situation of the IMF or the World Bank as well, they are corrupt institutions that are concerned about creating debt situations for the countries that borrow money from them. And when you are in debt, you are obligated to them for what they tell you to do. And that's how the so-called structural adjustment program has come in, which is the IMF program and the World Bank program.
I see. So from what you just said, I don't know why this part of the book kept on coming back in my mind. So speaking of how the banking system and the new institutions that are being implemented right now, and how some of these institutions, they are still promoting the idea of colonialism and stuff like that. In the book, there's a part that I was remembering now, the part where Nondo's family was kicked out from their rural home by the African police, being told that this land is too fertile for you to own, and therefore, from this day going on, you do not own this land. This land will be owned by the white people, and they were removed forcefully where Nondo's wife got shot in the eye, and they were moved into the townships where they had to carry books wherever where they need to go and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I want to bring this to the situation that we are having today, because that part, when I read it, it kept on taking me back to the whole situation with, for example, the EFF fighting for land and stuff like that. Why now do we have to go through the banks to get the land that was taken by force?
Yeah, this is a very good example. For example, in 1913, when the Afrikaners took away the land from the black people, and they took away 87% of the land, and 13% of the land was given to the blacks. And even that 13% was as a trustee held by the white community, which people are not aware of. However, when they took away that land, they did not pay the black people for the land that they took away. There was no compensation. So today, what Mugabe, for example, did in taking away the land from the white communities without compensation, and I think that's exactly what we should be doing in this country as well. The large majority of the black people in this world, in this country at least, are living still in squatter or so-called squatter camps. They are still living in conditions that were the same as what existed during the apartheid period. There has been no change for them. And that's the reason why some of them might even want to say that apartheid was better. They don't realize that they are in this situation because of apartheid, because of what the apartheid system has done to the black community especially, is that it has destroyed them so totally that they even think of themselves as inferior. You want a person to come and do some repair work? If a white person comes, you'll feel more comfortable than if a black person comes.
Yeah.
You know, somehow or another, there's this inferiority complex that has been imposed on us that we have actually accepted and we have internalized to such an extent so that when the white person comes to do the repair work, you feel more comfortable that he knows the work, although he may know nothing. But if a black person who is very highly qualified would come, you would not have the same respect for him. Why? Because we have been made to feel inferior. And we have internalized that inferiority complex. And it is a complex, really, because the white person doesn't feel that way, but we do.
Yeah.
Why? South Africa may deserve to be a member of the G20, but the rest of Africa is quite poor. They don't belong to the G20. But because of BRICS, you know, the new BRICS situation, and they want a counter to the BRICS, they have asked the African Union to come and join them. And they know they can subjugate the AU and they can force it to do what they want them to do, because the major part of the budget comes from these American and European countries.
But speaking of these big organizations like the UN, the EU, and all those, would you say those are just byproducts of like the New World, for example, ways to forget what happened so we can move forward on a new page?
Let me give you an example of the UN, for example. The UN, the major budget of the UN comes from America, the USA.
All right.
And if you look at the situation, the disaster situations around the world, if America wants to support those areas, the UN will have the money to support it. If America does not want to support those disasters, there will be no money available. The UN is also, unlike the IMF and the World Bank, which are completely under American control, so is the UN. And I'll give you a very good example. You have permanent members in the United Nations, which can veto anything that they want. Now, if South Africa is a good example. For the longest period of time, the United States, together with Britain and France, to some extent, used to veto all sanctions legislation that was the United Nations General Assembly passed. Now, there's the General Assembly, and then there's the Security Council. The Security Council is the body which actually implements the policies of the United Nations. Not the General Assembly where UN and every other country is a member. There are about 190 countries that are members of the United Nations.
Mm-hmm.
But they are part of the General Assembly. They cannot make any important decisions which the United States does not like. Here's another example. The United States is not part of the ICC, the International Criminal Court. But they want every other country to be subjected to the ICC. And most of the leaders of African countries have been brought before the ICC, International Criminal Court. What about America and what they did in Iraq? What about what they did in Afghanistan? American soldiers are free from being persecuted for their crimes. It's legislated. By whom?
So earlier on, we spoke about the land issue, and you mentioned that what Mugabe did in Zimbabwe is the exact thing that we might need to do here. On that, a lot of people might be against that, looking at the situation in Zimbabwe, whereby Mugabe kicked out all the white people and the sanction situations happened, and right now people in Zimbabwe, they are fleeing from their home to go into other countries for a better life, right? Better opportunities and stuff like that. For a South African person, someone out there might feel as if it would be better to have the devil they know than to end up in the same situations that the neighboring countries have met. So from there, it also goes back to the Americans, the American agenda. Whoever who is not on board with their ideas, they are seen as an enemy or as an outsider. There's certain things that you can have, there's certain things that you can do and stuff like that. So basically all those things, they become, to me, they end up sounding like sanctions. You are being regulated to do certain things, and some things you cannot do them. Would you say some of the African countries or even the AU joining these kind of organizations is just a thing of we're going to go with the bully, because at least if we have the bully on our side, when we're getting attacked, the bully at least will stand for us. Don't you think it's something in those lines?
Let's look at the banks, for example. The Reserve Bank, for example. Did you know that the Reserve Bank is a private corporation? Our South African Reserve Bank is a private corporation. Now, you see, Mugabe tried to nationalize the Reserve Bank, or the banks and the money. But that's a very costly process, and it can create more problems. South Africa, the EFF is now talking of nationalizing the Reserve Bank. But that would be a long, drawn-out process, and it would be very costly because there will be objections and court cases and so forth. What they should do is expropriate the Reserve Bank of South Africa and either replace it with the central bank or do away with it. But whatever they do, but they should not nationalize the Reserve Bank. They should expropriate it or abolish it. Now, here's an example. In the 1870s, when Lincoln was president, he wanted money for the Civil War. And he went to the bankers, obviously, and the bankers said, "We'll give you the money, no problem, Mr. President, but we will charge you, I think, 42% interest." I mean, that would bankrupt the country. But then Lincoln said, "Why should we go to the banks to borrow money when we are the government?"
Yeah.
So you know what the bankers told him? They said, "Mr. President, go fly a kite." Well, they
Sure.
didn't use those words, okay? But I'm just kidding. They said, "Go fly a kite." You see, with all the money that's floating around the country, it belongs to us, not you. So that's how Lincoln said, "Okay, we'll print our own money, but we'll print it in green ink." That's how you get the greenback. Okay? The
All
greenback.
right.
So all the money with black ink became, worthless, and the greenback became the dominant currency. Unfortunately, today, during the Bretton Woods Agreement, the United States dollar has become the reserve currency of the world, so that all trade that you do with one country and another, it's done in dollars. And that's where the BRICS has now come in, and to say that, look, we don't have to follow the dollar. And they have already started making payments with each other in their own currency.
All right.
Okay. Now, unfortunately, look, if the whites in this country were to leave, it would be a blessing for this country. It won't be a negative thing, because they are screwing up the country left, right, and center. And yet, just because they control the economy, we think we are in a better situation. Actually, we are not in a better situation. We are in no better situation than what the World Bank and the IMF are doing to the countries in Africa.
So speaking of that, for one person, someone might say that there is a lot of white people in Africa who are born in Africa. I don't know if that makes them African, but they're Afrikaners. And one might say that they love this country, and a lot of them, they might not be willing to leave. Would you say having Orania could be an alternative for white people to have a place where they can camp?
Look, Orania is another apartheid institution, like Bantustan. It's another Bantustan, actually. Now, if we did away with Bantustans so that we could be more free, why should we now go and create a Bantustan of white people only, which is Orania, for whites only? That would be another Bantustan. And we have gone through a long struggle to do away with Bantustans. And now you're going to create an enclave just for white community, for the privileged people. You see, what we are doing by doing Orania is we're giving the privileged few the right to have more, because that's what they will have. They will take their own, the economy and everything will be collapsed into Orania. They won't be in the whole of South Africa. We will become more poor once they develop Orania. But we don't make that connection, that most of the industries will also be going to Orania.
All right.
So what does that leave South Africa?
Speaking of Orania, you have mentioned that Orania could just be the alternative for the white South Africans to invest whatever they have into a new small society for them, which would be
To be a very privileged society.
looking at it, it already looks like it's well funded, and the infrastructure, the way, like looking at like some people when the way they talk about it, it gives a feeling that it's a community that is well funded and fast growing. Probably maybe in the next 5 years might be even better than some of the cities that we have. So if we are in a South Africa whereby we have another Bantustan being created in the eyes of everyone, do we have freedom? And when we talk about freedom, who are we talking about having freedom? Because back then it was the black South Africans that their freedom was taken away from them. So in this present day, do black South Africans have freedom? Talking about the economic freedom, because I would say, from what you mentioned earlier on, politically, we can feel like we have the freedom, but is it really the freedom that we can say as a people we have freedom?
Look, unless you have control of the economy, you really don't have total freedom. Political freedom is only the freedom to vote, or to say that you can go from one place to another. But economic freedom is what enables you to open industries, to open banks, to create wealth. And we are not in a situation where we are allowed to create wealth. That is still dominated by the white community. And as long as the white community is dominating the situation, we will always remain unfranchised. The franchise that we enjoy is, like I said, the ability to vote. Political freedom is there, sure, but we don't have economic freedom. We have economic apartheid, but we have political freedom. Political, we are free. But economically, we are not free. We are still, look, most of the people, black people, are either in debt or are in situations where they cannot afford to have their own home. But most of the white communities have their own homes.
True.
I mean, you just have to look at the townships. How many, the townships, if you go into a township today, I mean, it's you don't even feel comfortable there.
True.
But you go to a white area, and this is the sad part. While we have political freedom, the white areas are the ones that are still maintained well by the black government. Not the potholes are taken care of. You go to Epsichville, for example, And it is hard to drive your own car on the roads properly because of the way the roads are kept. But go to a white community area and the road is perfect.
Yeah.
Why? And yet we have a black government. The black government sees more to the white community than it does to the black community. Now, Frantz Fanon, I think you may have heard of him. He said something very interesting. He said there is something like I forget now the word that he used, the something of the oppressed. That, for example, I'll give you an example. There's a water pipe that has burst and it's running here. And every person will think that somebody else is going to do the reporting.
Yeah.
But in the white community, there's a white pipe that has burst. 95% of the households will be calling the municipality to come and repair the thing. Who do you think the government is going to do? The 95 people that have called, you attend to that. One person, and even if you're lucky to have one person who will call.
True.
They don't. So you have, you go into certain areas and you find there's water running all over, and it's precious water, clean water. But nobody's doing the reporting. We have potholes, the lights are not working, nobody bothers to call. So, you see, the situation is such that, like Fanon said, when you are oppressed, you do not feel you have power. You don't feel empowered. But when you have dignity, when you have power, when you have wealth, you do feel empowered. And you want your area to be clean, so that 95 people are going to call when a pipe is broken. Yet nobody calls in extra.
Yeah, you see, those things, even like on social media, we do come across a lot of memes and posts where black people talk about calling the white people so that they can report the matter, because the police itself takes white people more serious. If a black person go report a crime around the corner, we're gonna go see about it. But if a white lady go and complain about it, it becomes a whole big issue and stuff like that. But with all this being said, I believe that people out there, young people like us, would be more encouraged to engage in these kind of conversations, not only on camera, but also with their elders at their houses. Because we believe there's a lot of people who have grandfathers and grandmothers. Some, they're not really interested in these kind of conversations, trying to understand certain things so that in the future we can make better decisions. But I would like to thank you very much, Uncle A, for giving us this time, this opportunity to try, as much as we are the ones doing the interviews, me, myself, I'm also learning a lot. Just by reading your book, there's already a lot of things that I never thought about, and a lot of things also happened to cross my mind as I was reading. And I believe that these kind of books, I was watching Mark G's podcast, Podcast and Chill with Soap and Duka and Zola 7, the Kwaito legend. They were talking about the kind of reading material that must be exposed to the young African children, so that we must understand what is happening in the world today. And I would like to say this on camera with you here, okay? For people who are out there who would like to get this book, it's on Amazon. We'll get the link, and we want to put the links in the bios. Try to get this book so that you can read it by yourself, understanding and also engaging. If you have any questions, you can put the questions in the comment section so that we can come to Uncle Ahmed and ask him for the next episode we're going to do. We'll be addressing those questions and stuff like that. And for Zola 7, the library, things you spoke about, these are the kind of books that you need to have. I think each and every high school should at least have as many copies as they can, so that the young people, on their free times, they can read and stuff like that. So I would like to thank you again, Uncle.
No, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much. We're out.